We were gods in the aftermath, but what we chose didn't matter. The hospital room was nearly silent, this stillness only punctuated by the intermittent gasp of the respirator as it pumped air into Kayla's tiny chest. All checkups and tests in the past 9 months led everyone to believe Kayla would be a healthy, perfect little girl. She would skin her knees, have slumber parties, break boys' hearts, go off to college, and have her own little Kayla someday. But there was my angel in an incubator. Tubes down her throat helping her exist in the world while the doctors tried to figure out what went wrong. Her lungs were fine, her heart was fine, brain scans were normal, but she couldn't breathe. She could blink her eyes and move her tiny limbs. She grabbed her mother for a second, but had to be pulled away when her skin began turning blue. I put my hand next to her in the incubator, and she wrapped small fingers around my thumb. There was too much life in that grip for her to be in such a condition. Dr. Andrews rushed in and out of the room 4 or 5 times, and eventually he became a blurred lab coat darting back and forth. I stopped him eventually, my voice unwilling to go much higher than a whisper. "Have you figured anything out yet?" He would just sigh, shake his head and look at me in that patronizing way. That look doctors give when saying anything would just make it worse. I would break eye contact, not wanting to cry in front of the doctor or my daughter or my wife. My wife. Lucy hadn't spoken since the birth, finally uttering a short sentence sometime late in the evening, as the sun began to set and the mashed potatoes untouched on her tray began to harden. "What do we do?" I could only sigh, shake my head, and pass on Dr. Andrews' patronizing look. I hadn't slept well in the last month of Lucy's pregnancy. I considered it sympathy insomnia since she had her own troubles, hauling around a human while trying to get comfortable. One night, after thrashing around in bed for the better part of an hour, I decided it was useless and figured I'd go for a late-night walk. I lived in the kind of neighborhood a kinder writer might call sleepy. I called it dead. The neighbors were old and about as interesting and talkative as potting soil. Lucy and I had bought a home in a more family-oriented part of town and couldn't wait to move. I would be pulling double duty on the day Kayla was supposed to be born, rushing to and from the hospital to help the movers. It was not something I'd been looking forward to, but Lucy and Kayla deserved to come home to, well, a home. I thought about how to lay out our new living room as I prowled around our old neighborhood at 2 a.m. There were no cars. No lights were on in any houses beside my own porch light. The street lights cast their own limited cones directly downward, letting the opaque black flow in the empty space. I listened to my footsteps, listened to my breathing. I tried to clear my head, imagine the future, imagine being a father. There was a jungle gym up the street from us, and I walked by. I imagined Kayla, this little blonde bundle of happiness, bouncing around the wood chips, climbing up the slide, and trying to go all the way around on one of the swings. Her hair would shine in the sunlight like her mother's, reflecting brilliant gold and making me think of summertime. The scene in my head was cut short. I wasn't alone. Someone stood to the right of the playground, barely illuminated by moonlight to be much more than a silhouette, a shadow in the dark. I froze. My jaw clenched. Who was in the park at 2 a.m.? Stupidly, I voiced my own question. "Hey, who's there?" It was a setup for a knock-knock joke that could have very well ended with me dying, but the shadow didn't respond, didn't acknowledge, just stood as a pillar of night. I stared at it, daring it to move, but after seconds trudged by like hours, I concluded I was hallucinating from sleep deprivation and decided to head back to the house. Hallucination or not, I still made sure to back away, keeping my eyes on the park until I took one backward step onto my property. I went inside and sat in the living room until morning, watching the front door the entire time. The sun had nearly set, casting our room into a deep orange. Everything looked to be on fire, and honestly, it might as well have been. Dr. Andrews finally stopped his marathon to address Lucy and I. I can't begin to express how sorry I am. It pains me to admit we don't know what is wrong with your daughter. He exhaled sharply through his nose, and Lucy let out a sound so small I wasn't sure she had made a noise at all. I spoke next. Are there any other tests you can run? There must be something. You said yourself she was a perfectly healthy baby, right? And that's the problem. Everything is and should be fine. By all accounts, her inability to breathe should be impossible. He trailed off, realizing he was only digging a deeper hole. He threw me his trademark look and shook his head. But I refused to accept it that time. No, you're going to fucking do something more, god damn it! I spit the words onto his face, all full of false empathy. He was letting a newborn die because he was giving up. He couldn't just give up. I couldn't just give up. It was my job as a father to protect her, and I wasn't about to fail at that job a day after receiving my offer. Getting angry isn't going to help, Mr. DeMarco. At this point, I can continue to make calls, try to dig deeper, but you and your wife need to face the reality that there's an important decision you both may need to make soon. Yeah, and what the fuck is that? This rich little prick wasn't about to talk down to me. Whether we let Kayla live on that ventilator or let her go, this is no way for a child to live. And he walked out of the room. I imagined a future where 18-year-old Kayla drove off to college with a ventilator pumping in the shotgun seat. I was not about to let her go. Lucy coughed and called me over to her. We have to let her go. She didn't look at me. Her voice was a monotone. I have to do what's best for her. She doesn't deserve to live like this. But she hasn't lived at all! In that moment, I considered whether I truly loved my wife. It was a ridiculous notion, but I could not support her choice. I birthed her. I can make the decision. I love our daughter, and I've held our daughter. This is not how she should be. They'll fix her! I snarled at Lucy, having tried to no avail to suppress my disgust. You wanted to abort her, Jonah. Forgive me for not trusting your judgment. Lucy finally turned to me. Her eyes were wet and bloodshot. I think you should go help the movers. If I come back, I inhaled, rushing towards the door, and she's gone. There was no end to that thought. We toured the new house twice before committing, then haggled to a price that left us just enough room to afford renovations. On appearances alone, it was near perfect. But when we toured a third time, after the last owners had moved out, something had changed. A few months prior to the third tour, just before we closed on the place, Lucy had overheard me on the phone with my parents discussing how it may be best to abort the pregnancy, best to nix the house altogether. Even at the price we wanted, we would still be paying a higher mortgage than we currently had. It wouldn't make sense to bring a child into such a financially shaky situation. And are we really ready to raise a kid anyway? Lucy rushed into the room, grabbed the phone from my hands and threw it against the wall. She wheeled around and let her words tear through me. Money? You would kill our baby over money? I slept on the couch that night, which I suppose was more a symbolic gesture since Lucy left for 2 weeks to stay with her family. When she came back, we didn't talk about it, just continued planning our move and for Kayla to be born. I loved Lucy too much to continue the fight. I could be a dad. But those 2 weeks sucked the life out of the new house. The light fell limply through dusty windows, spilling over a gray carpet, surrounded by gray walls, opening up to a hardwood floor that looked to be little more than a black blob leading into a linoleum prison of a kitchenette. The stairs tracked mud-streaked, dim purple carpet up into the second floor abyss. I made my journey up, wanting to see Kayla's room, but the door was closed and locked. I tried, Lucy tried, but the knob wouldn't even move, as if the entire doorframe and knob were simply a part of the wall. Prior to that visit, Kayla's room was a beautiful space with a slanted ceiling, bright white walls, and pink carpet. I tried to kick in the door, but it was like kicking concrete. We left, resolving to call the realtor to tell her what happened. The movers hadn't shown up, so I turned back to the hospital, speeding down the turnpike as my mind rolled tape of the doctors pulling the plug. I sprinted through the lobby, smashed my hand against the elevator buttons, but stopped dead in the doorway of the room. Next to Lucy was a shadow. It was a silhouette, smoldering like smoke in the harsh fluorescent light. It crept along the wall from the window towards the bed, stopping at the incubator set up beside Lucy. My wife didn't notice as the shadow lifted an arm and rested a hand on my daughter's chest. She flailed her tiny arms, and the shadow unfolded 2 amorphous wings. I found my feet again and charged towards the incubator, roaring, "Get the fuck away from her!" I slammed into the wall, falling onto my back. I tasted blood, and the shadow dissolved. Lucy was staring at me, wild-eyed. "What the fuck was that?" Her voice was pitched much higher than normal, and she had her arms up as if to defend herself. "You saw it too?" "Saw what?" She looked around before focusing back on me. "Are you hallucinating again?" Lucy was no stranger to my insomnia. As I mentioned, past month was tough. After getting 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night, I began to see things, hear things, but I could always tell when something wasn't real. It would look like an overlay, like it didn't belong. That shadow, however, was part of the room. "No, the shadow." There wasn't much I could say. A shadow man touched our baby's chest? That would have gone over well. Lucy continued to gawk, not saying another word as I picked myself up and stepped out to grab coffee. Dr. Andrews came back around midnight. "Your insurance won't cover much more of this." He was blunt, clearly exasperated. He didn't have the right to be. "I'm sorry, but I have to ask what you've both decided." "No, you don't get to come in here this cavalier, you little fuck." Surprisingly, that was Lucy, not me. "This is hard enough without you pushing us." She broke into a sob. I choked down my own and walked into the bathroom, shutting the door behind me. One fist slammed into the sink, the other smashed into the mirror, turning it into a silver web, distorting my reflection. Look at you, you fucking loser. This is your doing anyway. Wanted an abortion? How dare you? You knocked her up and you didn't want to live with the consequences. Soon, I stopped talking, but the reflection continued. You married this girl, promised her the world, a family, and the moment that family starts to become real, you pull the plug. This is a sign you shouldn't have tried to be a father in the first place. You worthless piece of shit. I reached into the mirror and yanked my reflection out through the glass. The shards exploded around us and I grabbed my mirror self's neck. He gagged and I pressed, feeling his throat crush in my hands. His own palm slapped feebly against my chest and cheeks as he tried to escape, but it wasn't enough for me. I let go and my reflection wheezed on the ground, gaining back his voice. Is that all you've got? I threw a fist into his teeth. They broke like glass. I followed the punch with another. His blood trickled like a reddish silver and pooled next to him in the cracks between the floor tiles. The door flew open. Someone screamed. I looked up, then back down at the bloody face of Dr. Andrews. His neck was bruised purple and several teeth lay on the floor. The nurse continued to shriek in the doorway as security tackled me. Shadow people are one of the most common monsters in folklore and horror. They appear as ghosts or demons, perpetuating our fear of the dark, of the unknown. It's true, I wasn't ready to become a father, but that last month, something changed. I had a dream. I dreamt of Kayla. She was so small, but so fiery, so vibrant. I never saw her face. It was bathed in sunlight, the glare too strong for me to see her, but she talked to me. "Daddy, I don't think I can do this." "Why not, sweetheart?" I grew concerned as storm clouds gathered overhead. "Because you said so." I woke up and didn't know where I was. In my periphery was a silhouette. I blinked, it was gone. I sat in a cell for a day. Lucy showed up and explained that Dr. Andrews didn't want to press charges. He understood. I snorted. It didn't matter anyway. I fucked him up good, so the state wasn't about to let the case go. Lucy told me Kayla was gone. I asked if she made the call, but she looked at the floor. No, they said she had been gone for a while when Dr. Andrews came back in, but the monitors never showed a change. We spoke casually, since there was no other way to discuss it. Our daughter was dead, and the fact she lived at all was a cruel joke played out like a cosmic lesson. We never even had the opportunity to choose. The choice was an illusion. I would have prolonged the inevitable. Lucy had already accepted it. She moved home with her parents. I made bail, occupied the new house, and waited for my day in court. I furnished the house with nothing, sleeping on the floor, eating dry crackers on the floor, living on the floor. It was the only way I knew to mourn, but I wasn't mourning death. I was mourning the end of everything. Who would have guessed the universe was so petty? So, this morning I woke up and walked into Kayla's room with my laptop. The knob worked and the door opened. The walls had been painted black, and I don't recall if I had been the one to do it. I'm sitting on the floor as usual. I have a full tank of gas and a match. I'm not going anywhere.